evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Citizens of the World. As you all know, we are all of us the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. Join me every week, your host, Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Florida, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. As you know, we try to introduce topics under three basic headings in this show. We talk about immigration as an economic development tool. We talk about culture and education as a precursor to economic development. And we talk about sunny South Florida, particularly the city of Boca Raton, as a destination for international business and trade and the up-and-coming capital of Palm Beach County. Today I want to talk a little bit about, continue my talk about my trip to the Baltics. Last week I highlighted Tallinn, Estonia. I talked about that under the banner of it being a charmingly medieval and amazingly modern city. This week I want to move just a little bit further south to the country of Latvia and talk about its capital city, the city of Riga. Riga is known in Europe as the capital of inspiration. And in fact, as was Tallinn, the cultural capital of Europe for calendar year 2011, Riga will be the cultural capital of Europe in the year 2014. A little bit more on that later on in the program. But one of the things that jumped off the page to me in my visit to the three countries, that would be Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, was the Russian influences. These cities, particularly the city of Riga, has a major history with Russian influences dating back to 1941, when the Russians occupied Riga for its commerce value and the trade routes upon which it was built. Riga is actually a city that's built on the west bank of the Daugava River and leading to the Baltic Sea. It is truly a hub in that region of the world for commerce, both to the east and to the west, and presents a very important trading center for that region of the world. But what really interested me was the Russian influences, and that led me to think in terms of immigration as a precursor to economic development, and in some respects as a precursor to cultural experiences. So today I wanted to just speak a little bit about inter-country adoption and using the immigration laws to adopt children from foreign countries. Why did I pick today to talk about that? Well, the reason is, just recently there were some items in the local press, throughout the nation actually, about adoptions of Russian children, and one in particular was a woman here in Florida that adopted a Russian child, found that child to be uncontrollable, and returned that child to Russia, causing an international incident because based on the merits of that particular case. So I thought, well, I need to talk about that a little bit, and I need to talk about the fact that just recently the United States has entered into a relationship with Russia or entered into an agreement with the Russian Federation for the cooperation in the adoption of children. Secretary of State Clinton and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov signed the bilateral adoption agreement on July 13th of 2011 that will strengthen the procedural safeguards in adoption between our countries. Well, that's a specific item with a specific country, but just think that there are adoption proceedings and rules and procedures that have to be followed regardless of where the child might come from. So my first question is, what is an inter-country adoption? A simple definition of that is that it is an adoption where a child from a different country is brought to your country through permanent legal means, and that process is highly used and is the subject of this July 13th agreement with Secretary Clinton and the Russian foreign ministers. This agreement provides additional safeguards to better protect the welfare and interests of children and all parties involved in inter-country adoptions. Under the agreement, only adoption agencies authorized by the Russian government will be able to operate in Russia and provide services and adoption covered by the agreement, except in the case of the adoption of a child by his or her own relatives. Secretary Clinton goes on to state that the United States is committed to working with the Russian Federation on implementing the provisions laid forth in the agreement as soon as it enters into force, and the Department of State will publish criteria, procedures, and clear guidance relating to the agreement on adoption.state.gov prior to the agreement's entry into the force of law. I recommend that you go out to the AILA, American Immigration Lawyers Association, Infonet site and take a look at this particular agreement. There's also another agreement that was entered into by the United States with the Russian Federation, and that's for the subject of visa issuance. If you remember last week, we talked about visa waivers, we talked about B1 and B2 visas. Well, there is no visa waiver for nationals from Russia to come into the United States. But this agreement that the Secretary Clinton announced is for the issuance of non-immigrant business, tourist, private, and humanitarian visas to citizens of the Russian Federation, and for business and tourist visas to the United States. It anticipates a short-term official travel visa to both countries in keeping with the joint statement issued in May of this year. The agreement facilitates travel between the two countries and establishes stronger ties between the countries and their people. The agreement benefits the largest segment of our traveling Americans and Russians, business travelers and tourists, and allows for a multiple entry visa valid for a 36-month period of time. That's interesting. It used to be a long time ago that people could go into the embassies in a foreign country. They could apply for a multi-entry visa for a 10-year period of time, or in some cases for a lifetime. That is really a relic of the past. So this movement here, which allows for a multiple entry visa that exists for a 36-year period of time, is actually a movement forward in the effort to make crossing the border a little bit more easier in a post-9/11 world. The agreement anticipates streamlining the visa issuances by reducing the documentation required. Now let me talk about that for a second. When a foreign national goes to an embassy somewhere around the world and attempts to get a visa to come to the United States, they have to prove a couple of things, the most important of which is that they have an intent to return to their home country. There is a lot of noise that has been made over the recent years that we have foreign nationals crossing our southern border. But the reality is that many of the people that are in the United States in an illegal or undocumented fashion are people that arrived with visas and simply overstayed. I've made that point once before. Okay, but this visa that is now being, this process that is now being put in place between the U.S. and the Russian Federation anticipates that and is attempting to reduce the amount of documentation necessary to allow for this extended periods of time. The agreement will go into effect after an exchange of diplomatic notes between the United States and Moscow, so be on the lookout for that. Now, all of that was prompted because of a visit to the three Baltic nations and the Russian influences on those nations. So I want to take a moment. I want to talk about. I want to remind everybody that when I talk about visas and things like that, it is because my practice of law generally looks at the immigration elements. You can find more about my practice of law and myself at www.alzucaro.com on the internet. Now, I also want to make an announcement here today. Whenever anyone coming from another country anticipates crossing the international border with the purpose of permanent residency in mind, or even extended stays in the United States under a temporary visa, one has to always take into consideration taxation and the laws of tax in this country. The laws around a permanent resident for tax purposes are very complex and very deep. One needs to realize that if you're in this country and you fall under the definition of permanent residence for tax purposes, you have to pay tax on your worldwide income and then apply whatever tax treaties exist. So as a preliminary decision point for anyone who is interested in permanent residency in the United States, in doing business on a long-term basis in the United States, or even with the opportunity to become a citizen at some point in the future, during that period of time, you can and will be subject to taxation on your worldwide income here in the United States, which could have some very critical effects. Over the years, when I counsel people, I always talk to people, particularly people that have means are of a higher wealth or a higher asset value, that before they take any decisions, they should really understand the taxation consequences of what they're planning. Well, I finally have taken a step in that direction. I'm announcing today that I have entered into a business relationship with an international tax attorney by the name of Richard Lehman. I will, in future shows, I will be talking about tax issues as well. He and I, have already begun the process of starting a company which we will call U.S. Taxation and Immigration Law Firm. We'll be located here in South Florida, but our market is the world and our medium will be the internet. The reality is that we will begin to counsel or look to counsel clients or potential clients who have an interest in doing business in the United States and long-term presence in the United States from a tax point of view and from an immigration point of view. So for the moment, I would like to refer you to Richard's website where he has published in I think 7 or 8 different languages, seminars on various elements of the tax laws. One is a pre-immigration tax seminar. That website can be found at www.ustaxseminars.com. And I refer you to the pre-immigration because it'll give you an idea of the kind of thinking process necessary to reduce and minimize the tax consequence on assets and incomes prior to making any decision with regards to an immigration platform. Once tax is understood and finance is understood, then we will be able to counsel people on the immigration opportunities that may be available to them, particularly under the EB-5 visa, or under an L1 visa, which is an intra-company transfer visa, or under an E2 visa, which is a treaty trader, treaty investor type visa. But the reality is the tax consequences must be understood clearly and appropriately if one is to take the best steps available for purposes of tax and immigration law. So again, the website that I'm referring you to for the moment is www.ustaxseminars.com, and in the upcoming next few weeks we will come live with www.ustaxationandimmigration.com. 2 lawyers have come together to provide this service, Richard Lehman and myself. Between the 2 of us, we have over 50 years or more of experience in the areas of tax and immigration law, so we're looking forward to be able to service you. I also want to remind you that there is continuing developments and some rather positive developments in the area of investment for foreign nationals to acquire permanent residency, and you can find out more of that information at the website www.palmbeachregionalcenter.com. That's www.palmbeachregionalcenter.com. Now, I'd like to go back a little bit to Latvia. Latvia is known as the city of inspiration. I must tell you, it is an absolutely charming place. It has culture abound. It actually dates back to the 15th, well, it dates back even before that, but there is a Riga Cathedral that is absolutely incredible. One needs to, if you ever get an opportunity to go there, there is an organ festival there. The organ actually was started in 1545, and has over 6,000 pipes and sounds that are, it's just incredible. My wife and I spent a delightful evening listening to organ music in the cathedral, and I recommend anybody that's going to be in that particular area of the country it's a must-see. Now, why is that important? Remember, here in Boca Raton, our effort is to eventually have Boca Raton become the city of festivals. And organ music, classical music being played on the organ, can be replicated here in many different ways here in this particular area of the country. And this leads up to, or back to, my conversation of last week with regards to sister cities, because Riga, Latvia clearly is an opportunity for us to pursue the sister city relationship, particularly since they're going to be celebrating the European Capital of Culture, or the European Cultural Capital, in calendar year 2014. So I inspire everybody to go to Riga. I inspire you to visit the cathedral, and I inspire you to take my advice and visit that particular area of the world, because of its different influences and its different points of view that are clearly an educational experience for me. Now, I'd like to move on a little bit and talk about some of the items that we have talked about in the past. I came across an article just recently in the Immigration Daily. The article it can be found at www.ilw.com/articles. The article is titled, "The Iceman Cometh: What You Can Do After the Notice of Inspection, but Before the I-9 Audit Starts." Now, to refresh your recollection, we talked about E-Verify. We talked about the obligation on the part of businesses to retain records for all employees that are hired, regardless of their nationality, under the form of what's known as an I-9. We talked about the fact that the executive branch of government, or the Iceman, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bureau of USCIS, has the ability on a 72-hour notice to demand access to see all of the records that you keep, all of the I-9 records that you keep on employees in your company. Well, I refer you to this article because there are many companies that really should put themselves through an I-9 audit to determine whether or not they are in compliance with the law, and to formulate a strategy for how to correct any items that can be identified as not being in full compliance, and particularly what steps should be taken once one is noticed that there will be an I-9 audit by the immigration folks, and avoid the possibility of obstructing justice, the possibility of taking steps that could lead to more serious circumstances, including criminal prosecution. So I refer you to this article. It was written by Gary Endelman. It's well written. It's a good piece, a good reference piece for you to pursue. In line with that, ICE, again, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, been going around the country, and they are fining companies for the hiring of unlawful employees. Now, this is consistent with the Obama administration's use of these administrative techniques to identify companies that are not following the particular strategies necessary for purposes of hiring. I point you recently to some activities that have been taking place in the Boston area, where an investigation and audit of I-9 documents by U.S. Immigration and Customs revealed led to 14 New England employers being fined for various violations that enabled companies to hire illegal aliens. The inspection of these employers' documents are part of ICE workforce strategy and launched in 2009. One can get some access to ICE's workforce strategy by going to the following website: www.ice.gov/worksite/. Now, these fines, dating back to 2009, ICE initiated Form I-9 inspections against nearly 4,000 businesses across the United States, resulting in fines of nearly $7 million. Now, what happens when ICE comes in and suggests that they want to audit you? You have an obligation to provide them with the documentation. If you refuse, they can then go to a court and get a subpoena and get the records. You can be subject to fines, and multiple violators could eventually be subject to criminal prosecution. So enough of the scare tactics. That's not my objective today, but I just wanted to give you some of the downsides to items that we have talked about already in the past. Now, onward and upward. I do want to mention a couple of fun things. First, what did I do with my... hold on a second, folks. I'm busily trying to not make myself look too unprofessional. Remember a couple of weeks ago I told you I took part in the Leadership BOCA program. Well, the Leadership BOCA program was very useful. It has come to an end, and we have a class project. That class project will result in an organization called the Spirit of Giving, providing 3,000 young school children on August 13th with knapsacks and book packs and all of the supplies they'll need for this coming year's program. On August 4th, which is a week from today, we will have an event at Bash of Boca in Boca Raton, and that event will be a fundraising event. It's $20 contribution to get in the door, and it will have a poker competition, a pool competition, and a karaoke contest. This is a very exciting event. The leadership class is all committed to bringing people to this event and to raising some money for these underprivileged children. So I suggest that you be there, and I suggest that you can get further information on that at www.spiritofgivingnetwork.com. That's www.spiritofgivingnetwork.com, and the event will be taking place on August 4th. So, bringing us now down to close to the end of our show, I want to take another opportunity to do a little commentary. I call it fireworks in politics. Well, the fireworks this week have been absolutely incredible. We are still in the fight. There is still a debt service issue. There are competing proposals. The president is continually scaring the people. I have to tell you, it really is offensive to be told that the nation is going to default when default isn't even a possibility. But that's another thing. Here's my commentary. The president the other night got on the television and he asked people to contact their congressmen to force the issue in Congress. Well, I decided to contact my congressmen and my senators, and I decided to contact Representative Boehner on one hand and Senator Reid on the other hand. Well, I found a very interesting thing out when I went to Senator Reid's website. his website doesn't list the economy as a topic that he wants to have comments for. Well, maybe that's the problem, Senator Reid. Maybe you should realize that it's the economy, stupid. Okay? So, kudos to the new Republicans for standing their ground. There are real changes on the horizon, and I encourage them to to stand tall and stay strong. KOs to Senator Reid, the Democrats, and the presidents for the fear-mongering. There is no default on our debt. There's not even a possibility of a default on our debt. We take in $200 billion a month, and it's only $20 billion to cover the debt. There is plenty of money to pay the bondholders. Continuing to suggest it is a affront to our intelligence and must stop now. And then finally, kudos to all those Americans that are now having their voices heard. Keep it up. Support those elected officials that are voicing your concern and trying to preserve the best governmental system in the history of the world. It may not be perfect, but it's the best that history has to offer. So, bringing us to a closure, I want to remind you, we are all of us the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I ask you to continue to join me, Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night, and thank you.